Um, I'm here in Southern California. I've been storytelling for many a year. I spent 19 years teaching all the arts for all the kids, teaching theater through creative storytelling. And I was teaching in the prisons until COVID shut it down. It's called Arts and Corrections. And I think that this is my favorite thing of storytelling so far, helping the men find shape and tell their stories. It's just wonderful. Incredible.
That's amazing. That's great.
How about you, Kathy?
Yeah, hey, my name is Kathy Falco. I live in Los Angeles, not too far from LAX and the ocean, of course. And in 2017, I discovered that storytelling was a thing. And I fell in love with the women that I met who were telling, and especially the woman who taught me. And I've just hung on with them. I feel like the bottom rung of the ladder, but I still hanging, baby. They make me better. Yeah, it's wonderful to be around storytellers. Thank you.
And go ahead, Sherry.
I'm Sherry Anderson. I live in Auburn in the gold country, not too far from Kelowna and the gold discovery spots. And I was a Toastmaster for many years, entering a lot of Toastmaster contests. And I happened to meet Linda Kennedy, and she invited me to a house party. And here we were sitting around in her living room, and people started telling stories. And I was just impressed and inspired, I guess. So it was a very casual way to get into storytelling. But that's how I got started. Yeah, I don't know. Let's see, we've been doing the Storytelling Festival 6 years, so it was maybe 8 or 10 years ago when I started.
And how about you, Bill?
I live in Sebastopol. I have been an exchange place storyteller at Jonesboro. I have written 3 books. The first is the second of the 2 is a collection of stories from my life as a string bassist playing in the folk music movement. And my most recent book is an anthology of men's writings called Heart of a Man, Men's Stories for Women.
Oh.
So for all of you, like Bill right here, when it's your turn to, at the end of your telling, go ahead and show those books or anything you have like that is just fine. Okay?
Great.
All right. Well, it's 7 o'clock, right? Yeah. Let's
7:02.
Let's open it up. Let's roll.
Okay.
Okay. Ed, you want to explain how we're going to handle the mute, or do you want me to do that?
Go ahead.
So hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us tonight. I'm Andrew Loffer. I'm kind of tech support here. I have Sarah Sarah Armstrong is going to be my backup. And what we're going to do is mute everybody except for Ed. And then when it's time for the person to come on, they'll unmute themselves. But for now, if everybody can just mute themselves, it could make for nice presentations. So thank you very much. And I'm going to mute everybody right now. So Ed, you'll have to unmute yourself.
Okay. Okay. Yes. You can hear me fine? All right. So I'll start. You want to spotlight me? Let's record, huh? You want to set the record? You see how to record, Andrew?
It's already
To our 6th genre storytelling event. This month is romantic stories. So we're in for a treat with 7 fantastic storytellers from all over California, different swap groups. And you can donate at the Eventbrite link if you're interested in doing that. You can do that anytime during the event or at the very end. And if you have something that you want to say to the tellers, please use the chat box. So our first teller is Betsy Mosier from the South Coast Storytellers Guild. And she is one of the directors of that particular program, and they meet monthly, and you can definitely go to the SAC website and see when they have their events, and you can check them out. She's been a storyteller for over 30 years with children and adult programs. And she told me that she got into this from a storyteller named Angela Klingler. And she told her that how old or how fat or how ugly you are, you can still be a storyteller. So with all those parameters, she knew that she could fit into the storytelling. So here is Betsy Mosier.
Well, hello. One thing you need to know about me is I hate stupid stories. And with all due respect to Hans Christian Andersen, here's my retelling of one of his classics. Tiara was a princess, clear down to her toes, but on the night of the ball, she didn't look much like any princess you've ever seen or I've ever seen. But the story actually begins weeks before, when in a certain kingdom, the king and the queen were having breakfast with their son, Prince Filbert. Filbert, the queen began, your father and I think it's high time that you marry. And well, Prince Filbert agreed. But he explained, I don't know many women, many eligible young girls. And the queen smiled and said, we've thought of that. And so we propose that we hold a ball on your upcoming birthday. And at that ball, we'll invite all the fine ladies and all the fine gentlemen from our kingdom and the 12 princesses from the surrounding kingdoms. And from those young ladies, you may choose a bride, but she must have natural grace, impeccable manners, and she must truly be a princess. And it was agreed. And soon the palace was a hive of activities. The royal gardeners were busy plucking and pruning and planting. The royal bakers were devising delectable new desserts. The royal cooks were busy selecting the perfect fruits and vegetables from the palace gardens. And the royal candle makers were pouring hundreds upon hundreds of beeswax candles for the night. And while the royal orchestra practiced day and night, the palace calligrapher was calligraphing the most beautiful, the most exquisite invitations to send to each and every invitee. But unfortunately, no one thought to consult the royal weatherman. And on the night of the ball, it was raining, it was lightning, it was thundering, it was storming. And yet, one by one, each carriage arrived with all the fine ladies and all the fine gentlemen and all of the princesses, except one. Tiara's carriage, well, her wheel had split halfway across that long drawbridge to the palace. And the footman hopped down and said, sit tight, my lady, I will go get help. And Tiara waited, and she waited, and she waited until at last she decided to rescue herself. And with nothing for protection other than a small little parasol, Tiara set out on foot across that long wooden drawbridge. And in no time at all, she was soaked clear through to the skin, and her dancing slippers were completely ruined. She knocked at the palace door, and when the butler opened it, he immediately called the queen, who took Tiara by the hand and led her to her very own closet, opened the doors and said, my dear, choose any gown you like. And Tiara did. She chose the most beautiful iridescent blue ball gown. It had pearls embroidered on the bottom and a full skirt that would swish and swoosh as she danced. But unfortunately for Tiara, the queen had rather large feet. So if she was going to go to the ball, she would have to go barefoot, which is exactly what she did. Tiara entered the ballroom and immediately captured the prince's attention. Quickly, quickly, he made his way to her and he held out his hand and took hers and led her out on the dance floor. And around they went. And all the while, Tiara, she was making up clever lyrics to the orchestra song. And the prince noticed just how light she was on her feet in comparison to some of those other clumsy princesses he danced with who did nothing but stumble across the ballroom in his arms. Well, she danced with the prince as often as was prudent, but in between, she danced with some of those other fine gentlemen from the kingdom. And some of them, in their heavy leather boots, why, they were rather clumsy dancers and they stepped all over her feet. And it wasn't long before her toes began to curl and ache. But the dancing went on. And the more often the prince danced with the Tiara, the more infatuated he became. Finally, it was time for the orchestra to take an intermission break, and the doors to the dining rooms were opened wide, and there were tables and tables and tables laden with the most delectable supper items. And the prince made sure that he was seated next to Tiara at supper, where she entertained him with mischievous tales of her childhood. And don't you know that both the prince and the queen noticed which ones of those princesses ate with their fingers or chose the wrong fork or the wrong spoon? But Tiara, oh, she was lucky. Her mother had made sure that she knew the proper use of each and every fork and spoon. And by the end of supper, oh, the prince was enamored. After supper, the dancing resumed, and around the couples whirled in the ballroom, and every chance when he had it, the prince danced with Tiara. And by the end of the ball, he was in love. But when finally the candles burned low and the orchestra could not play one single additional note, why, the ball was officially over. But still, outside, the storm raged, and the queen insisted that each and every guest stay. And she sent the chambermaids all through the castle, preparing beds and rooms for all of the guests, with one additional instruction. At each bedroom, for each of the 12 princesses, each princess was to get 12 downy mattresses stacked one upon the other. And on top of those mattresses were 12 eider-down quilts. And as the beds were made, the queen followed behind. And below each of the princesses' mattresses went a pea, a tiny little round pea, below the bottommost mattress. Soon the castle was filled with the gentle sounds of snoring as each and every guest settled in. Well, they were all sleeping except Tiara. She was tossing and turning. She flipped from her right side to her left and from her left side to her right. She put her feet where her head had been and her head where her feet had been. She could not get comfortable because all night long, those fine gentlemen with their heavy leather boots had stepped on her feet and her toes ached and curled and she could not get comfortable until at last it happened. She flip-flopped herself clear off of those 12 eider-down quilts and those 12 downy mattresses and landed with a thud on the floor. And now not only did her toes ache, but her elbows and her knees were bruised. And she got very little sleep that night. Well, early in the morning, the storm abated and the sun came out streaming through the windows, and one by one and two by two, the guests awoke and they made their way down to the dining room where the queen had ordered a breakfast laid out of all types of delicious foods. And the queen herself stood at the dining room door. And as each of the guests came in, she welcomed them. And as each of those princesses came in,
All of a sudden you're muted, Betsy.
Yeah, you got muted, Betsy.
Okay, I think, okay.
You're okay now.
And, okay. And the queen stood at the door, welcoming each and every guest. And as each princess entered, she said, "Did you sleep well, my dear?" And all of the princesses, well, 11 of the 12 of them said, "Oh, yes, your majesty. It was wonderful. Thank you ever so." And when Tiara entered the dining room, the queen said, "And did you sleep well, my dear?" And Tiara, whose mother had always insisted that she tell only the truth, shook her head and said, "No, your majesty, I'm afraid I did not." Well, the queen noticed the dark circles under Tiara's eyes and the fresh bruises on her elbows and the way she rather gingerly walked into the dining room, and she just naturally assumed that it was the pea, that tiny little green pea below the bottommost mattress that had kept Tiara tossing and turning all night. And as the prince had declared his love for Tiara and she for him, the king and the queen gladly gave their permission for the two to marry. And they did. And they lived happily ever after. And it isn't until years later that now you and I know that the reason Tiara married her charming prince was all because her feet hurt. And that is the barefoot and the princess and the pea.
Oh, I love that. Thank you so much for a fun twist and a great ending.
Thank you.
Oh, perfect. Okay, so our next storyteller is our technician for tonight, helping us out, Andrew Loffer. He is president of the Sacramento Storytellers Guild, which is the group that I'm also a member of. And he is a poet. He's a storyteller. His house is amazing. He has a large garden with all kinds of interesting vegetables and fruit. And Andrew is a prolific writer. And if you get on Andrew's mailing list, he sends out a new story every day. And he has compiled those stories since 2014, and he has just produced his first book. So, and he can tell you a little bit more about this. I think it's coming out within a week. Andrew, can you spotlight yourself?
Hi, I think no, maybe I'm not spotlighted.
Well, now you're up there.
Am I up there now? Okay. So yeah, it's hard to kind of do this and do that at the same time. But anyway, thank you everybody for letting me tell you a story tonight. I do have about 183 stories that I've written. I send one story a week out. I don't send one every day. So if you'd like to get on that list, just send me an email and I'll be happy to put you on it. It's at dadloffer@gmail.com. So the title of my story tonight is called Falling in Love. And this story actually comes from that set of stories that I've written and that's going to be in the books. But anyway, what's it feel like to fall in love? How do you know when you fall in love? Well, the answer to the first question has been, espoused a million times in song and verse. But the second question, how do you know when you're in love? That was elusive for me. I didn't know at all until it really actually happened to me. So falling in love is really kind of a process. For me, it was a process. Lightning didn't strike. I didn't see my wife and then just, wasn't love at first sight or anything like that. It was a process. And frankly, it was a pretty long process. For the first year that I knew her, she wouldn't even talk to me. I saw her walking down the street on campus one day. I said, "Ooh, I need to talk to that girl." So I went to talk to her. I said, "Hi, how are you? I'm Andy." And she looks away. Wasn't interested in the least in me. So, okay, whatever. It happened to me before. I just didn't worry too much about it. So a couple weeks later, though, I find out that she's working for the same professor that I was working for. We both went to UC Davis. So when I walk into the lab, there she is sitting there, standing next to the lab or the lab desk. And so I decided to go ahead and say hello again. "Hi, how are you? I'm Andy." She looks away. Didn't want to talk to me. So whatever, I didn't take it personally. It's just the way it was. So, it was kind of that way for a whole year. She wouldn't talk to me for a whole year. And then one day I'm sitting at the library and she's in one of the little comfy chairs at the other end of the room and I caught her eye. Well, she smiled at me and I was shocked. My heart went a little flutter, It's like, okay, well, wow. So I went over and I started talking to her. And all of a sudden, it was like the last year never existed. Suddenly, she's very interested in me. She's talking with me. We're having a great conversation. And I was like, okay, great. So I asked her out. I said, would you like to go out to dinner tomorrow night? She goes, yes, that'd be nice. That'd be real nice. And I'm just like, again, it's like, holy smoke, real nice to go out to dinner with me? I mean, I was just thrilled. She was placed up on a pedestal. She had tons of points all racked up all at one time. So that was great. So we set a time, and it happened to be the first day of spring. So I got all dressed up, and I drove over to her house. I opened the gate, walk up the stairs, knock on the door. Bump, bump, bump. No answer. I'm like, what the heck? Knock, 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 knock. No answer. So I'm all dressed up, and I've been stood up. I'm really feeling kind of like bad. But, so I turn around and I'm looking out at the road thinking, okay, where am I going to go? And suddenly I notice this motion at the side. And I look down and this massive German Shepherd is walking up the steps toward me. And he's locking eyes with me, man. I mean, he's like really looking at me. And I thought for sure he was going to eat me up. But I just prayed, please be nice, be nice. He was nice. It was great. I pet him a little bit. He started wagging his tail and it was all good. So I start to leave. And then there's motion to my left. And I look down the street, and here comes my date, now wife, walking up the street in a beautiful spring dress. And I still remember that dress. It was gorgeous. She had been to her mother's to iron her dress. She was a poor student, hadn't gotten an iron yet. So her mom lived right around the corner. So she was over there ironing her dress and then came up and kind of explained that. I said, oh, okay, no problem. Neutral points, no big deal. So she invites me into the house for last minute preparations, and she dabs I see her in her room, I can see her in her bedroom, and she puts a little perfume on, and then she takes lotion and she rubs it into her elbows. Now, it's silly, I know. Today it's silly, I know. But when that act of rubbing lotion into her elbows was just really feminine to me. I don't know why, but it just kind of, made me think, oh, wow, I've got a date with a real girl tonight, So we go out. I take her to a movie. The movie was called Being There. And I don't know if you remember that movie, but it was a Peter Sellers movie. It was his last movie. And for me, it was just a very, very boring movie. Well, apparently it was boring for her too, because when I looked over to her to comment on the movie, she's completely asleep. Her head's back, her mouth's open. I mean, so I'm thinking to myself, oh, what did I get myself into? This is like real negative point. So after I watched the movie, I woke her up and we left to a bar. We went to a place called Eppie's. It was disco era. So we went to have a drink, and the lights were flashing and lots of music, lots of noise, and I'm talking. And I'm talking, and I'm talking, and I'm talking. And I am not a talker. I'm a storyteller. I'm not really a talker. But she's not saying a word. She's sitting there going, and I'm just, my mouth's getting dry. I mean, I'm losing all my confidence. Am I that boring? I mean, this is terrible. So really the negative points are just really, really adding up. Well, finally she says something to me. She looks at me and she goes, can we get out of here? So I'm like looking at her, blinking. And so finally I said, okay, sure. She was cute and I wanted to keep the thing going as long as I could. So last ditch effort, I took her out to a nature thing. I took her out to the American River. We were on a levee where you could overlook the river. It was beautiful. Spring night, the water was flowing, it was warm, fresh air. All of a sudden she comes alive and she starts talking and we start having great conversation. And so the negative points start to kind of dissipate and it was all good. Finally got her home that night. And I still remember that first goodnight kiss. It was smooth as silk and as sweet as honey. And all the negative points just melted away right then and there. So yes, indeed, I did ask her out for a second date and lots of dates thereafter. So remember, that was the first day of spring. So we had the whole spring quarter to get to know each other a little bit more. So we were going out here and there. We're going to school, working hard, you know. So we went out a number of different times and had a good time. Well, then summer came. She needed a job. I needed a job. I actually had a job on campus already, but she got a job an hour and a half away from Davis with the California Department of Forestry as a firefighter. So she was gone. And here I am, left alone for the whole summer on Davis campus, surrounded by very young, nubile women, a whole bunch of them. And I'm all alone. And so anyway, I did pretty good for about a month. And then my eye kind of started to wander a little bit. And it was like, you know, I'm getting kind of impatient. Well, luckily, she cut her summer short and she came home. So it was great. So we got to start back where we left off. I was so excited about that. So we were tentative at first, going out, being very careful, being on our best behavior and so on. And then we started to get to know each other a little bit more, started laughing at the same jokes, listening to the same music, you know, teasing each other, wrestling a little bit, yes, and finally staring into each other's eyes after we explored every inch of our bodies together. It was just marvelous. So I still didn't know I was in love. I just didn't know. I mean, take a 2x4 maybe to hit me over the face. I just didn't know what it would take for me to understand that I was in love. It just didn't really occur to me. So anyway, after a few months, my mom found out that we were going out, that I had a girlfriend. And so she invited me and Nancy up to dinner. Well, she, unbeknownst to me, also invited my 4 older sisters to dinner as well. So I felt so bad for Nancy. I mean, talk about going into the lion's den. But she did pretty good that night. So the girls were just really checking her out. And we were talking and having fun. And then all of a sudden I said something. I don't know what it was. I said something that my sisters disagreed with. And so they just jumped on me. And I don't know if any of you have older sisters, but they freely express their opinions whether you want them to or not, right? So they're really jumping on my back. All of a sudden, my wife speaks up in my defense. And she said something to them. And all 4 of them clammed up. They just stopped talking. And I couldn't believe it. And it was at that moment when I looked up and I said, I love that woman. Why at that particular moment, I don't really know. You know, she was protecting me. She valued my opinion more than a lot of other people did or something. I don't, for some reason, that plus all the other stuff, it just convinced me at that moment that I was in love. Now, did she notice the moment Cupid's arrow struck my heart? I don't think she did. Not that early in the night. Maybe later on in the night she did. But anyway, thank you very much.
All right. Yeah, love stories. Well, your wife is one lucky person to get a catch like you, huh?
That's right.
And I'm sure a lot of women can relate to your story about men being kind of slow on the uptake.
Yeah, well, it's been 40 years and she still can't sleep through a movie. So, it's all good though.
Okay, so will you please spotlight Sherry Anderson? Okay, our third storyteller is Sherry Anderson, representing the Foothill Storytellers Guild. Andrew, right now it looks like Betsy is spotlighted, not Sherry.
Sorry, I got the wrong one. I'm working on it.
Okay,
Oh, yeah.
right.
So wait, no, that's Betsy. For some reason, it's Sherry's going to Betsy when I hit it. I don't know why. I don't know what's going on here.
Well, Betsy, you're going to have to tell all the rest of the stories tonight.
Oh, there she goes. Okay. Okay,
Okay.
so Betsy, I'm going to undo you. Remove spotlight from Betsy. There we go.
All right. So yes, we are technological geniuses here, as you can tell. Like everyone else, we're learning all about the Zoom technology. Well, Sherry is someone that I've gotten to know very well over the last few years, because she is kind of the glue behind the Foothill Storytelling Guild, as well as the Auburn Storytelling Festival. And without her and her amazing fundraising ability, that event may not happen, because that event is free for everyone. And and they pay the tellers well. They have children's concerts in the morning, and they pay those people. They pay they have a workshop. It's an all-day event. It's a wonderful event with a workshop in the afternoon, and then an open liars contest and some open mic telling. And in the evening, they feature usually about 6 storytellers. And they just had it back in January 20th. So it's an annual event that you'll see from SAC. So, and she also is the founding member of a writers group in her Auburn area. And the group events she also puts on has spoken word, poetry, writers that can read some of their work, and storytelling. So she can tell you about the next event that she's got going, but please welcome Sherry Anderson.
Thank you, Ed. That's very nice. I grew up in Roswell, New Mexico. Now, my family was there before the aliens. In fact, my family homesteaded in New Mexico just after it became a state. And my grandparents had a little piece of property, 160 acres, that they farmed in Roswell. And I love to go over to Grandma's house because my best friend in all the world lived at Grandma's house, and that was my Uncle Ned. Now, the year that I was 8, Uncle Ned was 10. You see, my mother was the oldest child, and Uncle Ned was the youngest child. So, the year that Uncle Ned was 10 was the year the Roswell School District decided every 10-year-old should learn to play a musical instrument. Uncle Ned was so excited. He could see himself playing a fiddle in front of a country western band. So the two of us did what we usually did when we want to find out something. We jumped on our bikes and we went to the library. We searched that whole library. It was a small library, and they only had one book on fiddles. And the title of it was The Stradivarius Violin. Well, we checked it out anyway. We took it back to Grandma's and we both read it cover to cover. We knew everything there was to know about violins. The day came when Uncle Ned brought home the music case. He walked in the kitchen and he slapped that music case down on the kitchen table and he opened it up, and inside was a trumpet. It seems that there were no fiddles available that year. It was a trumpet, and he was so disappointed. Well, I've always been kind of a Pollyanna, and I says, well, the trumpet will be good for parades. So we put together a little impromptu parade. There was me. I had this wonderful stick I was using for a marionette baton, and then there was the 3 dogs. There was Sissy, Sally, and Susie, and there was Knuckle Ned with his trumpet, doot, 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 doot. And back at the back, that was Billy the goat. He got into everything that had to be any fun. And so we started a little parade around the property there. Oh, when the saints go marching in, squawk, squeak, squeak, squeak. That trumpet sounded awful. If Uncle Ned was disappointed before, he was just bummed now. Oh my. But I had an idea. I said, you remember that book we read about Stradivarius and his violins? You see, Mr. Stradivarius, he would take his wood and he would put them in this concoction, and he'd let them set for a whole year before he would ever cut into the wood and make a violin. And that's what made his violin sound so sweet. So what I said to Uncle Ned was, That's what this trumpet needs, is to have a sweet Stradivarius secret seasoning sauce treatment. We looked around, we found an old lard bucket that trumpet would set down in, and we set about putting in Stradivarius seasoning. We put in some cabbage leaves. We put in a couple of scoops of manure. It called for German beetles, but we didn't have any German beetles. We had New Mexico red ants, which trumps everything on the earth. So we put in a half a dozen red ants. I had the book and I was looking at it, and the next thing it called for were peach pits. And we were in luck because Grandma had a peach pit making machine. It was called a peach tree. So Uncle Ned and I, we took the bucket and we walked out to the orchard and we found the peach tree and we started picking peaches and eating them up and putting the peach pit in the bucket. And I ate 9 peaches. Not to be outdone by a girl, Uncle Ned ate 10 peaches. We were full of peaches. I picked up the book. I looked at the recipe. The next thing we had to find was some German red wine. We knew we would never find German red wine at Grandma's house, but maybe out in the barn, Granddad might have something that would work. So I raised up. And as I raised up, those peaches raised up faster than I did, and I started to puke. And Uncle Ned, he grabbed the bucket and put it there, and up came all those 9 peaches. And Uncle Ned, not to be outdone by a girl, he stuck his finger down his throat, and up came his 10 peaches. Well, we filled up that lard bucket. We decided that was plenty good enough. We put the lid on it and we set it over by the cellar door. I didn't know it at the time, but that was the last time I was going to see Uncle Ned for 30 years. When I got home that night, Daddy said he had gotten a new job in California and he had to be there Monday morning. So the 3 of us put all we could put in our car, and California, here we come. And we never went back. I went to school, I grew up, I got married. And one day, an invitation came for my husband and myself. It was from Uncle Ned. He was calling for a family reunion. He still lived there on the old home place, and he wanted all of us to come back. So we did. Oh, I don't know if you've ever been to a family reunion, but let me tell you, there's a lot of old people at family reunions. I don't know how all those young people got so old. I didn't get old. Anyway, about the 3rd day, we're sitting out on the lawn, we're having a nice visit, and I asked Uncle Ned what happened to that trumpet. You know, the one that we were seasoning with that Stradivarius secret seasoning sauce. And he said, well, darling, he said, you see, the school district, they sent Daddy a bill for that trumpet. And Daddy handed me the bill. And as long as I had to pay for that trumpet, I figured I might as well learn to play it. He said, in fact, I got a couple old Yahoo guys, and we're going to be playing at a honky tonk tonight downtown, and we're just hoping the whole family will come along and support us this evening. So my husband and I, we went back to the hotel, and we're putting on our California honky tonk clothes. You know, I had on one of those denim shirts with the embroidery and a ruffle skirt, and I had pink cowboy boots, probably the only pink cowboy boots in all of New Mexico. We looked good. I'm sitting there, I'm putting my makeup on, and I mentioned to my husband how much I really like Uncle Ned's wife. And he started laughing. He says, honey, he says, the two of you are peas in a pod. You finish each other's sentences. Well, I turned around to look at my husband there, long, skinny drink of water, the spitting image of Uncle Ned. Now, there are New Mexico honky tonks, and there are New York jazz clubs. When we found the address that Uncle Ned gave us, it was just a plain little building with a neon sign in the corner. Ned's Place for Jazz. We walked in, and on the bar there were stacks of CDs. Ned's Trio playing jazz. On the wall were posters. Ned's Trio at the Copenhagen Jazz Festival, at the Newport Jazz Festival, at the New Orleans Jazz Festival. Now the crowd was way back in the back, and almost like in another room. Uncle Ned was on the stage, and he saw us coming in, and he waved to us, come on down. He had saved us a seat right there in front. So we kind of got in, and we got settled, and then Uncle Ned stepped up to the microphone, and he had his trumpet in one hand, and he grabbed the mic, and he says, well, he wanted to welcome everybody, and he's going to start tonight the way they start every night, and he just invited everybody to join in and sing along. And then he put the trumpet up to his mouth, and he started playing. Oh, when the saints go marching in, I want to be in that squeak, squawk, squawk. Oh my gosh. Everyone stopped singing. The place got silent. Uncle Ned pulled that trumpet out of his mouth, and he looked at the left side and the right side, and then, oh my gosh, he looked down into the end and put his hand down in there, and he pulled something out. He walked over to the edge of the stage, and he said to me, he said, here, this is yours. Put it in your pocket. And then he went back, and he put the trumpet up, and he started again. Oh, when the saints go marching in, I want to be in that number. All 5 verses. I mean, there was stomping, there was singing, there was hallelujah, maybe even a parade back there somewhere. And then everything calmed, and he came up to the microphone, and they got started on the reason for the evening, improvisational jazz. He put that trumpet up to his mouth, and he started playing. He made that trumpet laugh, and the trumpet cried. The trumpet sang. They played music that had never been played before. They played music that had no names. Somewhere along in the evening, I opened my hand to see what it was he handed me. First, I thought it was a pebble, and then I saw what it was. It was a peach pit, a 30-year-old peach pit. It had been helped and rubbed smooth. I flipped it over, and the other side had saw marks. It had been sawed in half that very day. I put it in my pocket. I knew where the other half was. The other half was in Uncle Ned's pocket. Thank you. Thank you. It's a little odd to talk and not hear people laughing and replying.
Yes, it is. You did a great job. That was great.
Thank you.
Ed, you're muted.
What a wonderful tribute to your uncle Ned. And I love New Mexico myself.
Oh, thank you.
And I imagine that you probably saw a few aliens down there, and I'm sure we'll hear that in another.
Well, I put out my Navajo rugs tonight just to emphasize the story.
Very nice. Okay, so please spotlight our next teller. This is Kathy Falco, and she's a new teller for us. She's with the Story Masters of the Los Angeles area. And Kathy is a nurse navigator, and that's been her passion. She helps parents. I hadn't heard of this before, but maybe she tells a little more about that. She helps parents navigate and work with doctors and have a good experience with the doctors that they're going to work with. She is also a member of Toastmasters International and has went through their program for public speaking. And one interesting fact about Kathy is that she took professional dance lessons, ballroom dancing. And I would imagine that before long, we're going to see her on Dancing with the Stars because she has entered dance competitions. She's probably modest. She didn't tell me if she'd won any, but you know, I'm sure she's probably an excellent dancer. So please welcome Kathy.
On a beautiful fall afternoon in 2003, I became a widow. Burying my husband of nearly 22 years and a friend of 30 was unbearable. As everything felt broken, as a mother, I knew our 16 and 17-year-old children needed to survive their father's passing. So I moved mechanically through each day, getting them to school, me to work, trying to be a good role model. But several weeks later, I sat exhausted on our family room sofa, our children just a few feet away at the computer, searching colleges. Panic washed over me. What was their future going to be like, I thought. And then, as if something was unleashed from within, up and out flew the words, "No one in this family messes up." Both children turned and looked at me in silence. The fear on their faces said it all. They knew the new house rule. It was meant for me too. And then more words followed. If one day I ever get invited to go somewhere that requires me to wear a little black dress, I'm going. They stayed silent. I fell silent, wondering, what was that? That was me. I was fighting back. Death may have taken one of us, but grief was not going to have its way with the three of us who were left. Now, that first year that my husband died, it was like I had to hire a professional for everything, mostly attorneys. One of the attorneys I hired was a man named Tom. Tom and I met twice that first year. And when we concluded, he said, "Listen, as things come up, please give me a call." Things kept coming up and I kept calling. Each year, even 4 years after my husband's passing. And I got to know Tom better through these phone calls. He was 10 years older than me, had been divorced 10 years, had children similar in age to mine. And on our fourth phone call together, it was late 2007, he asked me about my children, and I said, oh, they were thriving and in college. As a matter of fact, I went back to school too. I'll be done in a few months. Tom's response surprised me. He said, how about I take you to dinner to celebrate when you graduate? Okay, my voice cracked back at him. And as I hung up the phone, I thought, he's probably just being nice, and I'm much too busy anyway. But a short time later, I discovered Tom was being more than nice when he called for us to choose a date. And I discovered that I had a worthy little black dress event to go to. But as the date drew near, I started feeling nervous. This was just dinner. This wasn't a date. Maybe a little black dress was implying something different than I wanted. So I called my children, who by now were dating experts. Both declared, "Mother, you wear that little black dress and you go out and have a good time." On May 2nd, 2008, Tom and I sat at a corner table by the windows at Yamashiro's restaurant in the hills of Hollywood, California, overlooking the city of Los Angeles and the lights below. I was nervous. I tugged at the hem of my little black dress. Relax, I thought. This is just dinner. After tonight, this isn't going anywhere. At first, I sat like a scientist, watching her subject. I wanted to see how another man would order dinner, select a wine. So whenever Tom said, "Oh, what would you like?" I said, "Oh, I'll have whatever you're having." But as the night progressed, I started to notice Tom, his light brown eyes, his white hair, his short beard and mustache of varying colors of dark and white. And I started feeling a different kind of nervous. I don't remember him looking this good. Now, it might have been the night air or the little bit of wine, but he started to look like Sean Connery, the iconic James Bond actor who went through his life with varying degrees of hotness. Tom looked like the classic old hot Sean Connery. Tom looked good. When dinner finished, he asked me if I wanted to see the gardens. Out in the garden, we had it all to ourselves. As far to the left or the right, we could see the city of Los Angeles. Tom interrupted while we were admiring the view and said, "I think you lost an earring." "Oh, I did," I said. And he said, "Well, were they expensive or sentimental?" as he was looking on the ground. "No," embarrassingly, I thought. "They were just costume." "Well, may I have the other one?" he asked. "Sure." Took it off and placed it in his open hand. He wrapped his hand around it, turned back towards the view, and launched it until I saw it disappear into the night sky. Now, there was something that made me start feeling nervous, a different kind of nervous. It might have been the night air or a little bit of wine, but I started feeling flirty. I leaned into Tom and I said, "I hope you made a wish with that throw." He leaned into me and he said, "I did." And he kissed me. He kissed me good. Well, about 10 other diners showed up in the same spot that we had had all to ourselves. So we ended our evening there. No further plans, which was fine because this was just dinner. After tonight, this isn't going anywhere. But once I was home, I couldn't help but think about the night and that kiss. And like a schoolgirl, I knew Tom was thinking about it too. But then panic washed over me. Did I mess up? I was too busy for this and way too busy for these emotions. A few days later, Tom called to invite me to a Chicago Cubs game at Dodger Stadium. "Would you like to go?" he said. And I said, "Yes, but not as a date." And he very gently said, "Okay." We went to the game together. And while there, I got to see a lot more charming qualities that Tom possessed. And afterwards, from time to time, he'd call me, and he always would sweetly ask, "If you have time, would you care to join me?" And if I did, we'd have dinner together or go to an event together. Or sometimes he'd drive the 405 on occasion and come visit me. In 2012, 4 years after our Dodger Cubs game, Tom called me and he said, "I know you're busy, but I'm going out of the country to see a total solar eclipse. Would you like to come with me?" I thought, I've never known anybody that did such a thing. And well, let's see, I might be able to make some time for this. While we were in Australia, I got to see amazing total eclipse of the sun and watch Tom be so adventurous. I liked it a lot, and I liked him a lot. And when we returned home, Tom still called me more often. I would be busy less often, and he'd drive the 405 more often so we could see together, so that we could be together nearly every weekend. Endurance and perseverance were qualities I admired in him too. In 2018, on May 2nd, 2016, exactly 8 years after Tom and I had our first dinner, we returned to Yamashiro's restaurant. This time, our children and family and friends are with us for our wedding in the garden. This isn't going anywhere. Took my heart to places I could never have imagined. And because I made time, I got to see a Chicago Cubs team win a World Series, a first in 108 years. I got to see a second total eclipse, this time in nearby Oregon. There's one less car on the 405 freeway every weekend. And a little black dress still hangs in my closet because in the end, love doesn't mess up. In fact, love endures all. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. Oh boy, yeah, true love, nothing like it. I bet the eclipse was amazing both times. I know people that have done that, and they're very romantic also.
Yes, incredible. Thank you.
And so do you guys dance together?
We do. We do.
Okay, so you're the team that's going to be on Dancing with the Stars?
Sure.
What kind of competitions do you go into?
Well, mostly by age.
Oh, okay.
And ballroom dancing.
Nice. And are there different styles that you do in there? Do you have any that are particular to you?
Oh, the rumba.
The Roomba. Oh, nice. Very nice.
Mhm.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. Please spotlight our next teller, BZ Smith. And while she's getting spotlighted, BZ has been around this storytelling world for 47 years, and she's only 43 years old. I mean, I couldn't quite figure that out when she told me
That's
about
it.
that. But BZ is an amazing storyteller, has been to the National Storytelling Festival in Jonesboro. She was a tandem teller. I don't remember, with 3 different people, she told me, over the years. She has won 2 Parent Choice Awards for CDs. Is that correct?
Yes.
CDs that you produce. She represents the Motherlode Storytelling Guild and lives up in Sonora. And she is a gardener, a teacher. She's not a teacher now. She's a retired teacher, but she taught 2nd grade and 8th grade. She has a really amazing children's program that she can tell you probably more about. So please welcome BZ Smith, and share us with your awards you got there, or the CDs, if you would.
There they are. This was the first one done in 2000 with my storytelling partner, Cynthia Restivo, the Story Quilters. We won Parents' Choice Gold that year. It was wonderful. And then a few years ago, another friend and I did a CD about California history called Striking Up Gold Mountain. Ed, can you still hear me? Hi, Ed. I'm having a little technical problem, so I'm going to disappear for a split second and
I can
see
hear you. I can hear you fine.
Okay, for some reason, my cord for my laptop is not functioning quite right, but we're just going to go with the flow here. So here is the story I'd like to share with you. In the 6th century, on the Arabian Peninsula, there lived 2. Qais ibn al-Mulawa and Layla. They were two in flesh, but one in spirit. Their love story survived for 600 years in the oral tradition until it was written down in the 12th century by a Persian poet named Nizami Ganjavi. And then it traveled, that story, from east to west. And in the 1600s, the eyes of a young man named Will Shakespeare fell onto that story. And it is said that the story I'm about to tell you was the inspiration for Romeo and Juliet. So let me take you far, far back in time, far, far back in place, far away, to the desert of Arabia. There lived a great chieftain with immense wealth. He had gold, jewels, silk carpets, many, many herds of goats and camels, but he was a generous man, welcoming, a good person, much content he was, except for one thing. He and his wife had never had a son. There was no one to carry on his name. There was no one to continue his work. There was no one to do good works on his own with the great chieftain's wealth. And so the chieftain and his wife prayed and prayed, and yes, it happened. A baby boy was born, and they named him Qais. Qais, the baby, his face shone like the moon and the sun. Qais, the toddler, waddled about, smiling and laughing. Qais, the boy, was full of questions, curious as could be. And so his father said, "It is time for you to go to school. And when you go to school, Qais, you will be a good scholar. And someday you will become a man of great knowledge." And that is just how it was. Qais did so well in school. He learned quickly. His teacher smiled. The other students who became his friends were amazed and appreciated his quick wit. And when he spoke, his friends loved to hear his voice, for it was strong and true, resonating with such depth. And so it was that Qais did grow into be a wonderfully good scholar. Until one day, a fateful day, when a new student came to the madrasa. When she walked into the hall, Qais was stunned, struck by her beauty. The girl, her skin, it glowed as if it was kissed by the sun, like gold and bronze. And even though she wore a veil, he could see her lustrous black hair. And there he saw glistening strands of rainbows through her hair. And her eyes were like deep midnight pools that just drew him in. Her name was Layla, which means the gentle, dark night. And from that day forward, Qais, the scholar, had a terrible time concentrating. No matter what he was trying to do, she would catch his eye and he would be pulled away. He would try to think, and then his mind would become muddled and fuddled, and he would look at her, and every now and then he saw that she was looking at him as well. And so it went day after day until one day, Qais stood up in the classroom, his arms flew up into the air, singing to the heavens, and he called out, "Layla!" His friends snickered, others whispered, and the teacher's jaw dropped open. Day after day, it got worse and worse until one day, Qais just called out her name. Words tumbled from his mouth in some strange random pattern that created a beautiful, beautiful poem of love. And with that, Qais threw himself out the door. He ran out into the open sky, where he could call out her name. In the marketplace, he danced round and round and round as he recited poetry in her name and in her honor, a smattering of words tumbling all around. Now the merchants in the marketplace, they looked at the young man and they all snickered and laughed themselves, and they started pointing, calling out, Majnun, Majnun, he's a madman, he is a Majnun. But Kais did not care, for his heart was filled with love, and still the songs, the poems, they flowed out from him as he spun round and round and round. Oh, but his father cared. He took the boy aside and he said, Kais, you must concentrate again on your studies. You're going to be a great scholar. Cure yourself of this lovesick madness. Kais looked at his father and he said, no, no, father, I never will be cured of love. I will be sick. If you were to cure me of this, I will surely die. And with that, Kais ran out of his father's home, ran out into the desert where he could call out to the open skies and the open land and sing and dance and fill the whole world with the love he felt for Layla. And so his father decided to take a different approach. He had his servants fill a wagon with much of his treasures, and then he went to the home of Layla and spoke with her father, hoping to make a marriage match between the two. But Layla's father looked at the great chieftain and he said, no, no, my daughter, she is perfect. I cannot let her marry your son. They call him the Majnun. No, it cannot be. And in just a few days, he had made another match with a decent, good man who was a worthy choice for his daughter. And then there was a wedding. But on her marriage night, Layla went to her new groom and she said, I cannot consummate this marriage, for Allah knows that I am already married to the one that they call the Majnun. I love him dearly, and though I have never laid with him, he is my heart and soul, and I will never be able to consummate this marriage. Her new husband looked at her and he said, I will respect this. I will honor you, and I will have the gift of looking at your face every morning and watching you sleep every night, and that will be enough. Meanwhile, out in the desert, the Majnun danced and sang. He called out her name. The animals of the desert gathered around him, prey and predator, sitting together quietly in his circle. They guarded the Majnun, and soon stories flew all about the region about the crazy madman who was filled with poetry of love and stories and dances of great, great desire. And then his father, who was growing old, wanted so much to see his son. He had one of his servants take him out to the desert, and there they found him, the Majnun. He was leathery and burnt his skin, and his bones were showing through his skin, for all he ever ate was what he could forage. And he sat there with his animals. His father took hold of his face and said, you are my Kais, my son. I am here to bring you home. We want to heal you. But the Majnun looked at his father and said, I am a stranger to my tribe. I am not the son that you knew before. I cannot go home with you. And he laid his head in his father's lap, and he wept and he wept. And that day, the chieftain returned home, knowing he would never see his son again. And it is true, for 2 days later, the old chieftain died. Now, Majnun went back to the village when his father died, and back again when his mother died. And when he sat at his mother's grave, beating his chest, he finally ran off back into the desert where he could howl out his grief. He could mourn for the loss of the life he had had before and for never holding his Layla. A man came to see him one night. The man said, "You are the Majnun, and I have been searching for you, for I have something for you." And the man handed a letter to Majnun. Majnun looked at it, and the man explained, "I was in a village, and one evening I saw a tent glowing, and when I went to the tent, there was a beautiful young woman in the tent. I asked her who she was. She said her name was once Leila, but now she did not remember her name. She said that she had gone mad as the Majnun in the desert who she loved. And when I told her I would find you, she gave me this letter to give to you." Oh, he took that letter and he devoured it, reading and reading. And then he said to the man, "You must take me to her." And so that very night, they traveled far and they traveled fast until they came to that village where the tent was still aglow. And Majnun stood not 10 feet away from his beloved. He could see her, and he said and sang to her, "You are my beloved. We will be together for eternity. We have found each other in this night. My heart is yours. Your heart is mine. For now, until forever." And with that, he disappeared back into the desert, and she wept and wept and wept. Now, the book of life, the pages of that book, every page has two sides. And one day, years later, her husband came to her and he spoke. "All these years, I must have been keeping you a prisoner, you longing for your Majnun. And so it is time for me to set you free, for you to go and live the life that you want to live. And I thank you for the time that you gave to me, but now you are on your own." And then that man grew gravely ill and he died in just a few days. And oh, Layla, she grieved her husband. She grieved him for the love that he had given to her, but she had not been able to return. And in her bittersweet sorrow, she felt that same sickness sinking into her own body. And she called her mother to her and she said, "Mother, I know I am going to die soon. And when I die, please dress me in my wedding gown and send word to Majnun." Not long after, a messenger came to the deep, deep desert where he found the hermit there, and he gave him this message. And like a thundercloud on a great storm pushed by the wind, Majnun hurried back, and there he was to sit at his beloved's grave. In a quiet meditation, he sat with his desert animal guardians all around him, day after day, until he took his last breath. And soon he was nothing but bones. The animals, they returned to their home in the desert. And the tribes people of Majnun's tribe and the tribes people of Layla's tribe buried him, and there they were together, lying for eternity. And oh, how this story has lived on and on through countless generations and years. The legend of Layla and Majnun, a beloved story from Persia. And tonight, I ask each of you to help this story live on, for I have told it to you, so you will remember it.
Mm.
Thank you.
Ooh, what an epic tale. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you
My
for
joy.
transporting us to unique places. There was one thing I forgot to say about Beezy.
Uh-oh.
Here we go. This is unique. At the age of 16, she was in combat in Vietnam. I probably should stop there, but I'll give a little bit more to the story. Her father was a pilot, a cargo pilot during the Vietnam War out of the Philippines. And they were doing a run over when they're to, was it Saigon or Da Nang?
We were,
Saigon.
want me to tell the story real quick, Ed?
Yeah, you go. You say it.
So my dad was a pilot for Flying Tigers. I was living in Riverside, California, where I went to high school. And my mom and I were there, and my parents decided we should have Christmas together. So my dad and I, my mother and I, hopped on a freighter at Norton Air Force Base in San Bernardino, and we flew all around the Pacific Rim on these cargo planes, my mom and I, and the cargo in the back of the plane. And we went from Yokota, Japan to Okinawa. And then from Okinawa, we landed, we were on approach to land in Saigon. And when the pilot asked me if I wanted to sit in the jump seat, so I sat in the jump seat behind him. It was the middle of the night. And as I was sitting there quietly, because I knew to be quiet, I was watching out the windshield of the plane, and I could see there was battle going on all around me because there were flashes of explosions going on everywhere. And I remember as a kid saying to myself, oh, check this out. It looks like a movie down there, a war movie. It looks like a John Wayne war movie. And then it hit me. It was not a movie. It was the real deal. And we were landing in it. And the plane landed under attack. And the minute we got on the ground, they threw open the cargo door, and there were people there to usher us to a bunker. And we went under the ground, and we're in a bunker where we could see people's feet running along the tarmac all through the night. And so it was that I was the first student in my high school graduating class of 1968, Ramona High School, to experience combat in Vietnam. And about 6 hours was plenty for me. I lost.
Okay, please spotlight our next storyteller, Linda King Pruitt. She is from the Storytellers of San Diego. And currently she has been telling stories in prisons for a while. And she said one of her real joys is to help those men find their story. And she takes them on journeys, the hero's journey through folk and fairy tales. And she was steeped in folk and fairy tales by her mother, and then her father added the tall tales in. So she's been a storyteller since 1994, and she's been sharing stories and coaching. We're in for a real treat with Linda King Pruitt. So please welcome her. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to share a story with you from Chaucer's Canterbury Tales. It's the Franklin's Tale, or Love on the Rocks. In Brittany, there lived a knight who on his wedding day vowed that he would never insist that his wife obey him, nor would he ever give in to jealousy. And she, for her part, swore that she would always be a true and faithful wife. And so they lived in perfect happiness for nearly a year. And then the wars called the Knight of Arragus overseas. Dorigen, his wife, cried herself to sleep every night, and she spent all of her days just longing for his safe return. Her friends tried to cheer her, but there was one worry that continued to haunt her. The castle in which she lived was on the sea, overlooking the ocean's edge. And every day she would walk the ramparts, and she would gaze down on the jagged black rocks that line the shore. I wish these horrid rocks would sink to hell, What if my husband should be wrecked and drowned as so many other poor wretches have lost their lives on this very spot before? Time passed slowly for Dorigen. But one spring day, her friends came and took her away to a nearby garden where a picnic had been laid. It was the freshest, softest time of year. And after they ate, the young people sang and danced gaily on the grass, all except for Dorigen, who sat miserably apart, pining for her husband. Now, among the young men dancing on the lawn was a young squire named Aurelius, who had secretly been in love with Dorigen for almost 2 years. Now, he had never dared speak to her of his love, but every day he would write love songs and ballads, and whenever she was near, he would gaze longingly at her and sigh meaningfully. Well, now that Averagus the knight was away, Aurelius saw his chance. He went to Dorigen and he knelt before her. My lady, is there no hope? No hope? I have loved you for so long, and I have suffered so much. I implore you, take pity. Dorigen could scarcely believe her ears. Aurelius, is this your will? Surely you know I would never be unfaithful to my husband. But when she saw the stricken look on the young squire's face, she couldn't help but laugh. And then she teasingly added, but I'll tell you what, Aurelius, if you take those hateful rocks from round the coast, I promise I will be yours forevermore. But my lady, that's impossible. Is there no other way? No, no other way. And laughing, Dorigen ran off to join her friends. The young squire sat as if turned to stone. All hope is gone. There's nothing left for me to do but to die of unrequited love. Oh, time passed, and the night Averagus returned safely home from the wars. Dorigen was happier than my words can tell. Husband and wife were never apart now. Meanwhile, the young squire languished in misery, sick and thin for the love of Dorigen. His brother watched Aurelius grow sicker and weaker, and he feared for his life. And then it occurred to him that perhaps an astrologer would be the very person who could help his brother. The very next day, the two of them set off for the city to find an astrologer. Now, just before they entered the city, they met up with a friendly young scholar who surprised them by telling them that he knew the purpose of their journey and that he could help them. He invited them to his home that very evening. The magician, for so he was, fed them a most excellent dinner. And then afterwards, he conjured up a series of magic scenes. They saw, as clearly as if it was happening in the very room in which they sat, dogs, hounds chasing after a stag, and then they saw a hawk flying after a sparrow. The scene changed and it became knights jousting at tournament, and then Dorigen dancing, and Aurelius was in the scene dancing with her. The magician clapped his hands and the scenes vanished. Aurelius threw himself at the magician's feet. If you can do that, surely you can make those rocks disappear. I will pay you 1,000 pounds. I would give you the world if it were mine to give, if only you can make the rocks disappear. The next day, the magician and the two brothers set off for Brittany. The magician studied hard to figure out how he could achieve the illusion, taking into account the time of year, the state of the tides, the position of the moon and the stars. He calculated how to make it seem as if the water had risen and the rocks vanished by magic. And indeed, for a week or more, magic was in the moon as it rose over Brittany. Magic was in that throbbing light as it pulled the sea back and forth in the sink of it. Magic was in the high clouds and the pulsing of the stars as the rocks disappeared. Aurelius sought out Dorigen. My lady, I have done as you commanded. I do not ask anything of you but that you remember what you promised. Dorigen hurried to the seashore. As she gazed out over the water, all color drained from her face. How could such a thing, such a monstrous miracle have occurred? What shall I do? What trap have I fallen into? She stood, poised, ready to throw herself down into the sea. If she lived, surely she must keep her promise to Aurelius or be shamed forever. And if she kept her promise to Aurelius, then too she would be shamed forever. She returned home to her husband and told him the whole story. And Averagus, that noble knight who lived by the code of honor, said, well, wife, it's perfectly clear that you must keep your promise, and we both must live the best we can with it. So dry your tears, my love, and wash your face. Let us both smile so no one may guess our pain. Dorigen was making her way to the garden where she had so foolishly pledged her promise to Aurelius when she saw the young squire halfway walking to her. My lady, where are you going? To the garden, as my husband told me to keep my promise to you, wretched woman that I am. At these words, Aurelius's love for her grew even stronger, but his love was more humble now. Oh, my lady, you both put me to shame. I cannot come between such a noble husband and wife, and I cannot bear to see you in such distress. I would rather die of love than to see such a noble lady be dishonored. From this moment, I release you from your promise. So smile, my lady. You see, a squire can behave as nobly as a knight, yes? Oh, Dorigen thanked that young squire again and again and again. And then she ran home and told her husband what had happened. And now Aurelius was left with a debt to pay off to the magician. The only way he could make the money was to sell everything he owned. The magician scowled. Did I not keep my side of the bargain? Yes, yes, said Aurelius. And did you not take possession of the lady? No, no, said Aurelius. And he told the magician what had happened. To his surprise, the magician applauded. Well done, young squire. Each one of you behaved as nobly as the other, and I release you from your debt. I shall not take a penny. Why, it's payment enough just to know that there are 3 such noble people left in this world. And with that, the magician jumped on his horse and rode away. And I shall leave you now. But first, I'd like to ask you this. Who do you think was most noble and generous?
Very nice story. I love going back to these epic tales, these classical tales. We don't hear them enough, or at least I don't hear them enough. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And you gave us all something to think about. Will you please bring forward Bill, a matinee?
Ah. Here I am.
Well, you're not quite spotlighted yet, but there you're in there. We're close. So Bill is someone that I met back in the 90s when Marion Ferrante and I put together Calibration at Los Alamos College, where I taught. And Bill was one of our storytellers, one of our 4 featured storytellers at one of those events in the 90s. And he was an amazing storyteller then. So you can imagine what a treat we're in for now. Bill had told at the National Storytelling Festival in Jonesboro in the exchange program. And he also in 2001 edited the Storytelling magazine for men. And Bill's been very influential for male storytellers in this field. He's also just recently published a book, and he'll tell you more about this, that's an anthology of very well-known storytellers like Jeff Gear and Bill Harley, and I'm sure hopefully Bill's in there. And one unique thing about Bill, and I'm only going to give you a piece of it because then he's going to take it into his story. Bill is a string bassist. So please welcome Bill Amatnik. Am I pronouncing it correctly?
Yes, you are, Ed.
Thank you.
And thank you very much. Before I begin, I'd like to thank Sally Holtzman and Liz Nichols of the Contra Costa Tail Spinners for nominating me to tell this evening. And thank you, of course, to the Storytelling Association of California for sponsoring this event. And finally, to Ed Lewis and Andy for putting it all together this evening. Thank you all. Before I begin, let me ask a show of hands, how many people know the folk music trio Peter, Paul, and Mary? Yeah, okay, that's about everyone. Peter, Paul, and Mary first came to my attention in 1962 when they released their first album, also called Peter, Paul, and Mary. The 2 guys in the group, Peter Yarrow and Noel Paul Stuckey, both played guitar and sang. There was a music critic at the time who referred to them as 2 cellos playing guitars. A sweet image, I thought. But to my eyes, the sweetest image was of their singer, Mary Travers. With her long blonde hair, the warmest smile and bluest eyes, Mary was a chorus of curves radiating femininity. Better yet, she sang sweetly and her harmonies shimmered. I was a 17-year-old folk music fanatic when their album came out. And like many guys of my age and music interests, I had a big crush on Mary. So I was delighted when in 1979, I got a call from Mimi Farina of the Bread and Roses Festival of Music. Peter, Paul, and Mary were going to be playing the festival that year and had asked for my services as the festival's house bass player to back them for their performances. Rehearsal would be the day before the first show, backstage at the Greek Theater in Berkeley at 1 o'clock sharp. The group overnighted me their set list. I drove to Village Music in Mill Valley and bought the 3 Peter, Paul, and Mary albums I needed to cover all the songs on the list and started studying the bass parts. And this is what I found out. That all of their tunes were fairly straightforward as far as the bass player goes, with one exception, and that was their big hit, John Denver's Leaving on a Jet Plane. Mary sang lead on this song. The guys, of course, played guitars and sang harmonies on the choruses. But it's the bass player who starts this tune off, playing what I'll call a melodic bass lead. So he kicks off the tune, sets the tempo, sets the groove, and sets the mood of Leaving on the Jet Plane with a bass line that's part melody and part bass vamp. As the lone bass, new boy on their block, opposite 3 people who had been playing together for almost a quarter century, when it came to kicking off Leaving on a Jet Plane, I was scared witless. Finally, the big day of the big rehearsal arrived, and I got to the Greek theater at 12 o'clock. You know, plenty of time to get real nervous. And then at 1 o'clock sharp, in walked Mary. Well, and Peter and Paul, sure. Mary was more beautiful and enchanting than her album cover shots revealed. I'm sure my jaw dropped as she walked into the room. Exuding confidence, Mary strode right over to me, introduced herself. Hi, I'm Mary Travers, and gave me a hug. Yes. Then she introduced me to Peter and Paul. We shook and howdied as men do. And then the four of us found a rehearsal nook backstage, took out our instruments and tuned up. It quickly became clear that Peter was their MD, their musical director. He took charge of the rehearsal and called the first tune for the afternoon. Let's try Leaving on a Jet Plane first, he said. An acid churn swarmed the pit of my stomach as I realized he'd called this tune first as a test for me. Then he turned to me, not Mary and Paul. No, he turned to me and said, ready? Well, I knew what ready meant. It meant, you do know why I'm calling this tune first, don't you, kid? Leaving on a Jet Plane, I said, you guys recorded it in the key of A major, but it opens in E major. Peter, I'm ready. And Peter counted off the song. 1, 2, a 1, 2, 3, 4. And I played the bass part the way I'd always practiced it. Mary walked over, looked me right in the eyes, and she sang, I'm standing here outside your door. I hate to wake you up to say goodbye. Oh, Mary, you can wake me up anytime. Dawn is breaking, it's early morning. Taxi's waiting, he's blowing his horn. Already I'm so lonesome. You and me both, Mary. So kiss me and smile for me. Tell me that you'll wait for me. I'll wait, Mary. Hold me like you'll never let me go. I'm leaving on a jet plane. I don't know when. And then Mary looked at me lovingly and sang, well, it was a sweet and deep feeling to be on the bass bottom of this classic acoustic harmony, surrounded by the singing of the voices who had created it. An exquisite and unforgettable moment. And there was Mary, just a foot away, singing a love song to me. The rest of the rehearsal went very well, as did our performance the next evening. But there's a funny thing about shows. A show can go by in a moment, but there are moments inside that show that seem like they last forever. And I remember one of those moments. Towards the end of the concert, Peter stepped to the center mic to sing the first two verses of a ballad, essentially alone. And Mary sauntered back to where I was playing string bass. She came up on my right side and gently rested her hand on my arm. And then she nestled her head on my shoulder and looked up at me real slowly. I looked down at Mary. We looked deep into each other's eyes, and that's when it hit me. Mary loved me. I could tell. A guy's got to know these things. Mary loved me. Well, I was floating, blissed. I don't know how I finished the tune. I don't know how I finished the set, but 3 tunes later, their concert ended and they left immediately, on a jet plane, no less. I didn't even get to say goodbye to Mary. I didn't even get to see her again for a year and a half. Finally, I read in the paper that they would be playing the Circle Star Theater in San Carlos. So I bought a ticket and waited impatiently for the date. Finally, the big night of the big show arrived, and I drove out to the Circle Star to see them. I went to the stage door, knocked loudly, and who opened the door but Mary? And she gave me a big hug and a kiss. Yes, but they were about to go on stage. So I said, okay, babe, I'll see you after the show. And I rushed to the back of the theater to watch them from there. They put on a thrilling concert that evening for a packed house. The audience sang along the entire show. It was a Peter, Paul, and Mary love fest. The three of them were always consistently excellent performers, and their performance that evening sparkled. But I do remember that towards the end of the show, Peter stepped to the center mic to sing the same two verses of that same ballad, you know? And Mary sauntered back to where their regular bassist, Richard Kniss, was playing bass. She came up on his right side and she put her hand on his arm. And then she rested her head on his shoulder. She looked up at him real slowly. He looked down at her, and that's when it hit me. Mary didn't love me. She looked at all her bass players that way. Ladies, Mary had used me as a prop in her act. Well, I played a rehearsal, a sound check, a pre-show warm-up, and 2 shows with them, all in the course of a couple days. But in that short time, I really feel I had touched the Peter, Paul, and Mary experience, as certainly it had touched me. It was an honor and a thrill to concertize with them, a cherished experience I will never forget. I must remember to thank Peter and Paul for it, to thank Mimi when I see her next for bringing me on as house bassist to accompany a raft of legendary folk singers, and when I see Mary next, to tell her, Mary, babe, all is forgiven. Thank you.
Yeah. Oh boy, what a fun, interesting story. And I do have some probably shocking and bad news for you. I watched them in concert also, and I have their album, Peter, Paul, and Mommy too. And when she sang to me. So she loved me.
Oh
So
no, you're my rival, Ed.
I'm your rival. I'm sorry, but thank you so much for a wonderful story. I appreciate that.
You're quite welcome.
Good memories. And I just saw a special on PBS. I think it was a week or 2 ago, about Peter, Paul, and I think it was Peter, Paul, and Mommy. Their album. It was on PBS, and I recorded it.
Oh, how nice.
Yeah. Okay, everyone. So, Andrew, can you bring all the storytellers up on the screen? Are you able to do that?
I can only do that, as far as I know, with gallery view.
Okay.
I can undo. Yeah, let me hang on. Let me move your spotlight. I thought I removed your spotlight. Yeah, I think that's good, right?
Yeah. Well, we just see you as a spotlight. I can see the 6 or a few people up on top. I don't see.
Put it on gallery view.
Oh, okay. I need to go to gallery view.
Yeah.
Okay.
Nice job, everybody.
Yeah.
Really
Thank you.
great. Really great.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, yes. Thank you all so much. It was an excellent evening. I thoroughly enjoyed myself and enjoyed listening to your stories. And next month, on March 17th, the third Wednesday of the month, we will be having myths and fables as our theme. So anybody listening, please who has something that can fit that topic, please let your swap group leaders know that you're interested in doing that. And then in April, we have historical stories, and May 19th are legends, urban and traditional. June 16th, fantasy, fairy tales, traditional and fractured. And July 21st are humorous laughing stories. And then we start our cycle over again with personal stories that we first started out with in August. So as a swap leader, a swap group can nominate someone for any of these events. You know, the sooner the better, if you know that you really have a story. And even our storytellers tonight can repeat, can also tell again. So thank you so much for everybody attending this event. And we are now going to sign off and hopefully see you all next month.
Thank you,
Thank
Ed.
you. Thank you,
Bye,
Ed.
everybody. Thank you so much.
And
Yeah,
Thanks,
and
Andy.
Andrew,
Thank
thank
you
you
so
for being our
much.
tech person.
I loved
Yeah.
meeting everyone new.
Yeah,
Well,
thank
it
you.
was nice to see everybody, meet everybody.
Appreciate it. Thank
Good
you.
night.
Good night, all.
Good night.
Right.
Good night, everyone. So, oh, we can shut off the recording. Do you know how to
Oh,
do that?
okay. Yeah, I can do that. All right.